Hello and welcome to this special discussion on Wire Facebook. We have with us a very special guest, Professor Abhijit Banerjee. He teaches at the MIT. He's a professor at the MIT. But the reason why we have him here is that he, along with three other colleagues, economists, Professor Pranab Bardhan, Rohini Somanathan, and Professor T.N. Srinivasan, very well-known names. They have put together a book, a set of essays under the title Poverty and Income Distribution in India. So, I am just showing you the book. Now, why this book is special is Abhijit, in the foreword itself, Abhijit calls it a project of nostalgia, an act of nostalgia, because this book essentially captures 6 or 7 decades of work done by Indian economists and public policy makers in the field of research on poverty. Now, India has, it is recognized that India has done a lot in poverty research, given its conditions in the 50s and 60s. It was one of the poorest nations, and how people like Professor Mahalanobis, who as part of the Indian Statistical Institute, he established institutions like the National Sample Survey Organization. So NSSO is something that that gained reputation over the decades as an impeccable, as an organization which came out with first class research, and India actually gained reputation because of that. Now, that is the past, and what this book does is it actually studies the whole trajectory of poverty research, how you look at poverty, public policy, and how things have changed over the years, and where we stand today, say, compared to the 50s or 60s. And to discuss that, we have with us Professor Abhijit Banerjee. Welcome to our discussion, Abhijit. So, tell us what prompted this exercise. It's a fascinating exercise. So, could you give us some background?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's not a new book. It's a book that was actually published in 1974.
You took it forward, yeah.
And then people basically forgot it. Mm-hmm. But it had kind of the who's who of who were, Amartya Sen and other very famous researchers who had all worked on this issue. And then the book was completely forgotten. You couldn't find it. You couldn't buy it. Mm-hmm. And then we realized that in fact it had sort of, there's still the ideas there, and the kind of especially the thought there had relevance. Mm-hmm. And so we thought, well, one thing we could do is we could update the book. We could just add some essays which kind of draw the line from there to now, mm-hmm. and turn it into a book that has resonance now. Yeah. So hopefully that's what we've achieved.
And there's a new essay by Amartya Sen I can see, yeah. which is there. And tell me, I was reading Amartya Sen's contribution, and he interestingly says that he had, in 1973 itself, he had felt, he had written an article where he had stated that India needs to look at poverty in a multi-dimensional sort of way, and we need to go beyond measuring poverty as a head count in terms of incomes or consumption expenditure. And this thought process has essentially been taken forward, and a lot of that is captured subsequently in your essay, in Pranab Bardhan's writings also. Now, are we there? I mean, are we sort of now rethinking or relooking at poverty, various dimensions, deprivation, etc.?
So, I think that we certainly have the conceptual structure. I think there was lots of research on how better we could measure poverty. Right now, as a nation, we don't do it. We really haven't. I mean, the sad fact is that about 1972, mm-hmm. people essentially lose interest in this subject. Mm-hmm. And it's only now that you see
Why does that happen?
Why does it happen? Well, there's a number of things that happen, but I think most importantly, there's a sense in which the Washington consensus starts to creep in, and they're not that interested in poverty. They're interested in growth, and this is not a priority, and it just sort of got forgotten. And what gets forgotten with that is the fact that our data collection apparatus is, once upon a time, it was the state of the art. In fact, we were the state of the art. We defined it. We created this product.
And our economists got invited rest of the world to speak on poverty research.
The Chinese sent a delegation, including Mr. Chu Enlai, who was in the premiere, to speak with Mr. Mahalanobis at the Indian Statistical Institute. They went there, spent an hour and a half talking to Mahalanobis. They invited Mahalanobis, who went to China for 3 weeks to teach them how to measure poverty. So this is something where we were the world leaders, and now we are sort of, it's all completely gone from our consciousness. We don't prioritize it. Our data collection apparatus is falling apart, and we don't really worry about it because we don't really think it's that valuable, to be honest.
Okay. Now, Abhijit, I read your essay, and I found something interesting, some observation that you make, which is that redistribution is no more a dirty word, and you say that redistribution is back in the lexicon of even right-wing regimes around the world. Now, it's interesting because you said in the 70s and 80s, when Washington consensus was taking roots, some of these things were forgotten. People thought that growth alone could, through trickle down, generate or reduce poverty. And now you're saying that right-wing regimes are recognizing redistribution as a very important component. And also, at the same time, you say that it is growth is neither necessary or sufficient for growth alone to reduce poverty. So where do you see this going from here in the Indian context? Because today we have a right-wing regime in India, and there seems to be a lot of focus on targeting new schemes, delivering housing to the poor, delivering all kinds of free cooking gas, which was a big issue in the UP elections. So do you think things are changing here?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I would say that this government kind of, before they came to power, they wanted to, I think, have kind of a radical reform of welfare, but right now they've completely backed off. I think it's neither politically realistic nor, I think, from the point of view of welfare, sensible. And I think they've backed off completely. In fact, as you say,
even in rhetoric,
they've completely backed off. Now it's all about, you look at the pictures of Mr. Modi. He's now this Deen Dayal Upadhyay scheme for women is being pushed, but it's that there's
Ujjwala scheme,
there's so many new schemes. I think one of the things that they're trying to do, which is also, I think, sensible, is try to rationalize these schemes, make them more efficient with less leakage. But I don't think the idea that we're going to scale back kind of redistribution has gone out of the window. I don't think there is any resonance for it, in or outside the the PMO.
Okay, so your sense is that it. So how would you characterize this government's policy today as it is evolving?
Well, I think the government is clearly very conscious that if it wants to stay in power, that it has to
deliver welfare.
And I think, given that it also wants to increase other investments, and there's a budget constraint, something has to give. So I think one of the things it's very seriously thinking about is, can we use JAM to reduce inefficiency in this process? Whether it's possible or not, those things we're not entirely certain about, but certainly that's the thinking.
Okay. Tell me, Abhijit, I want to ask you this fundamental question. There is a feeling among policymakers that simply by use of Aadhaar, as you just said, direct benefit transfer, use of technology, they can save enough money to increase welfare dramatically. Now, do you feel that what is saved assuming that they save a lot of money that is getting wasted today, do you think that's enough to sort of to meet all your welfare needs, or do you think fundamentally we need to really scale up welfare in several areas like health, education, etc.?
So I think there's two parts to my answer. I mean, one part is I think that I do feel that given our ambitions, we are not taxing people enough. I think the tax rates are, we don't have wealth taxation, we don't have estate taxation, we really are one of the, and given the exploding inequality, I don't see a way to really fund our ambitions without raising tax rates. In the end, you have to have heavier direct taxation. So that's one part of the answer. Second part of the answer is there's a third piece of it, which is, one is these better targeting, etc. But I think the really interesting spot where there's a little bit of effort now, which is to cut back the subsidies that are really damaging. I think the fertilizer subsidy and the power subsidy in rural areas are incredibly costly, not just for money. The power subsidy in rural areas is the reason why our water table is falling so fast. It's because people are pumping out water.
So it's impacting your water resources.
Yes.
Underground water resources.
Yes. So I think unless we do something about it, I mean, then especially Punjab, Tamil Nadu, places where water is really scarce, it's just going to be, the agriculture will be finished. So we really are looking at water table. Some places have fallen from 30 feet to 60 feet and even more. And this is eventually goes to nowhere.
Okay. So how would you, Abhijit, you also talk about radically rethinking fight against poverty, and your Poverty Action Lab, which you and your colleagues run across 70 countries, it's full of experiences, and you say that you're sort of trying to cross-fertilize, learn from each other. Now, how do you radically rethink the fight against poverty today in the Indian context? Since redistribution is not a bad word anymore, both right-wing and left-of-center regimes are agreed that redistribution has to be done. Now, how do you proceed from here?
Well, I think there's one thing that we've learned is that many things that people think are actually, obviously good things to do nothing. For example, I mean, if you look at education, the first order fact is that most things that seem fashionable to do to improve education don't do anything for learning. If you want to do learning, you have to focus on learning. There are a few things that absolutely do improve learning and improve it very fast. But you have to do those things. You have to basically focus on where is the lever. You have to find the lever. That's what we do in Poverty Action Lab. We try to help find the lever. And then if you push the lever, you go fast. But, what we do is often scattershot. We just hit everything, and then some things hit the lever, some things hit the wall, and lots of water flows out.
So how would your Poverty Action Lab say look at education? Because we're spending a lot of money. Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan.
Absolutely.
We've also legislated education as a right.
Yeah.
Now, you in your chapter, you say that education, even if it's a right, shouldn't we look at the outcomes? Should we audit the outcomes? And you say that in India we are not yet auditing outcomes of legislated rights. Like it can be education, it can be rural guarantee employment program. So is auditing part of your hitting the right button in the Poverty Action Lab kind of exercise?
Absolutely. I mean, so I think Pratham does actually. It's even sadder than that. Pratham actually does, through its ASAR, it does actually audit education outcomes. We have this is one of our great innovations of recent times. The ASAR is a great service, been imitated in many countries. We invented it. We don't take the results seriously. I've been on a number of discussions on NDTV and others where our leading politicians will just blow away the results. I mean, you'd say that this is a disaster. You really need to take it seriously, and the answer is, well, no. I think we think we are doing a good job. I mean, till you start taking it seriously, I mean, the whole point of data is that you have to actually accept it's the data. If you don't accept it, then it's worthless.
But they do accept the data. But they don't have ideas on course correction, right?
actually was on I think on NDTV dialogues with the then or the just ex education minister, the UPA, last UPA, and he basically said, I think we're just making lots of progress. I said, look, the data looks like we're doing worse every year.
So you're saying that they're in denial?
Yes, they just, if you don't take it seriously, if you think somehow this is going to go away if I close my eyes, then of course you're not going to make much progress.
Yeah. So Abhijit, we have a question from a viewer, Anubhav Singh. So Anubhav wants to ask you, why has the policy framework to tackle poverty failed in India, and what remedial steps are required? This I was asking the same question in the context of education. Now Anubhav wants to know it in a more general sense,
Well, I mean, let me start by saying it's hard to say that it's failed. I mean, I think the evidence suggests that, for example, Narega has actually reduced poverty. I think that there's lots of good studies of it, and it's very clear that it's raised rural wages and reduced poverty. So it's not that everything's failed. I think that would be unfair. I think what is true is that we
in spite of leakages in Narega, it has served its purpose.
Well, it could do better, but it's substantially reduced poverty. So I think it's not that everything fails. I think the more important issue is, could we do things better? So as I was saying a minute ago, we do things scattershot, like a little bit on this, little bit on, little bit on that. Whereas I think there is actually clear evidence saying this piece works and those are useless, and we should just pay attention to that. I don't think that it's such a mystery.
Okay. Tell me, Abhijit, in this context, this is my own question. This government, when it came to power, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in fact, said in Parliament that Congress's rural guarantee employment program was a monument of their failure. And then we see over the next 2 years, 3 years, as growth faltered and as unemployment grew, further worsened, the employment situation worsened further, this government started allocating more funds to National Rural Guarantee Program, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Guarantee Program. Now, from your, say, Poverty Action Lab perspective, there's a lot of literature you must have seen on its successes and its failures. Yeah. Now, how could you make this more productive? Should it be an asset creating exercise, or should it be a pure transfer of income? What should it be? I mean, what's your sense about Manrega?
So that's a complicated question, because it's a very it's a scheme that was designed to do many things, and it's not clear whether it's clear that if you wanted to do some of those things, you could do them better. I mean, one of the things it's done, which is interesting, is it made rural, the panchayat, being the head of a panchayat, a much more interesting job. There's much more competition for it. People are more interested in it. So is this going to have long-term benefits for the economy? We don't know. So it's not, I mean, it's not obvious what the right replacement should be, because it does many things. It changes rural political economy. It also, on the other hand, I feel like, this whole business of having so many people do things which are not particularly high quality, it may be a complete waste. You might be able to hand them half that money and just save the rest, and they might be then go and work in the labor market, and that might actually be somewhere generate a better outcome. It's not at all obvious that you necessarily need people to work 100 days a year to give them the money. You could maybe find other ways to target. It's not obvious that its design is anything close to what an ideal world would choose. So it's a complicated.
So what is the experience of, say, Poverty Action Lab in other countries while dealing with these very issues? I'm sure some of these issues will be common to developing countries like Indonesia, Mexico, India.
Absolutely. I mean, yes and no. In the sense that this is the world's largest workfare program. Most countries don't go this workfare route. They have not gone the workfare route. They find ways to target without making people say that. Our idea is that if you go out and work, you get money, otherwise you don't. Indonesia, for example, tries to target using a bunch of, they collect data and they try to figure out which house, kind of like the SECC, and using that data they try to target. So you could think of alternative ways to target money.
So targeting is a good idea, you're saying?
I'm not even saying targeting is a good idea. I'm saying what
it works in some circumstances.
Countries, yeah, it might be cheaper than making people work. Maybe that time they could be working in the labor market and producing something. So it's not obvious that you want to have people working on low quality government projects, basically. That's not the only way you could get people to target. You could target in other ways. So right now we have combined work on public projects with targeting. Those are sort of wrapped into the program.
Okay.
And we could separate them. We could have work on public projects and we could have targeting, and we don't have to do it through the same mechanism.
Okay.
So the world over, almost nobody uses workfare in the way we use it. That's the first order effect.
Okay, that's the first order effect, yeah. Okay, so Abhijit, in your essay in this book, you also talk about going beyond just going beyond just looking at headcount for poverty, determining poverty ratios, right? Income or consumption expenditure, and you're also talking about proxy means test. Now, this is something that somebody like Jean Drazer also talked about, and he wrote in EPW about this proxy means test, in the sense the assets owned by people. So over the years they acquire assets. So if people have a 2-room pakka house, so you could assume that they have means at a certain level already, right? So do you think this poverty means test is something that that we should look at seriously while delivering welfare?
Well, we do, in a sense. I mean, if you look at the BPL classification, that's essentially a proxy means test. Okay. It is a combination of a local verification, so the panchayat certifies it, but there's some proxy means test element in it. So we already use something like that. It's not clear that we do it very well.
And the SECC also use...
SECC also provides that. So we could do proxy means tests if we wanted. We have the data to do it. We're not using it.
And what does your Poverty Action Lab in various countries say about proxy means test?
The targeting is... So this has come back to your question from before, which is, should we go for targeting at all? The targeting at best is pretty inefficient. So another view is you should just go with saying that, look, let's put a very... So my personal view is that maybe we should give up on targeting.
Go for self-selection, is it?
And go for very low pain self-selection. Imagine that I say that, you have to go to an ATM once a week, put your fingerprint in, or whatever, your Aadhaar identification in, and then you can get the money. I think people who earn 50,000 rupees or more will not bother. This is just not going to be worth it for them. So you get self-selection, and you get a self-selection automatically.
So you get insights from these habits, behavioral patterns.
You use the behavioral patterns to target. I think that's going to be...
Do you do a lot of this in your Poverty Action Lab program? I mean, studying behavioral patterns?
Yes. So on many things, on healthcare, on in particular, I think in the case of health, these are crucial issues, and we've done a lot of work on that.
So here, Abhi, there are several questions for you from our viewers. One is whether, which is a bigger issue, rural poverty or urban poverty? This question comes from Nishant Kumar. So what would you...
I mean, both are big issues. It's that there's not that we... I think what is true is that urban poverty is a growing issue. It's an issue that we don't have a mechanism for. So there is no Narega for the urban population. So we are much better at targeting resources to the rural population than the urban population. We haven't really thought about how to do welfare for the urban population yet.
There's also one interesting question, Abhijit, on whether the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Guarantee Employment Program has any study been done to see its effect on farm output. There have been some members of parliament been complaining that that because of the program, their farm labor costs have gone up. Although the counter to that is that the ratio of people who are getting the benefit is so low as to be negligible as a ratio of total farm working
It's still true that
number,
there is a nice study looking at actually a couple of studies looking at the effect on wages, and rural wages have gone up. So it is true that the farmers are paying. I mean,
But is it such a bad thing?
No,
Why
I
not?
mean,
Why shouldn't they get higher wages? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the person who's hiring them might not like it, but
Right,
it's not clear to me that this is such a.
It is precisely members of parliament who representing the bigger farmers have been complaining actually.
So I mean, they're right in complaining, but I'm not sure that we can do. I mean, we can't both make the poor richer and keep the rich in the same place always. So it's what happens. I don't feel terrible about the fact that wages have gone up. It's our wages are terrible. I mean, they're not living wages. So the fact that they've gone up a little, why complain?
Yeah. And Abhijit, there's another question for you. This is actually in connection with your Poverty Action Lab program across various countries. Revati P. Rao wants you to explain the methodology that your Poverty Action Lab adopts for its evidence-based research. Now, you'll have to be a professor now to explain to us some basics.
What we do in Poverty Action Lab is we carry out large-scale field experiments. So if you want to know the effect of for example, introducing fingerprint verification-based payments in a NREGA-like program, what you do is you can you randomize some villages into getting somebody comes and gives you verifies by fingerprint. In the other place, it's that the status quo where the money basically ends up in the hands of the panchayat, who then doles it out and keeps some part of it. And when you look at and we choose these villages at random, so that when you compare them, you see that they're not systematically cannot be different because they're chosen at random. And when you then look at what happens after you introduce the programs, you can say that these villages, which to start with were the same, now they have very different outcomes. And you find, for example, that the places where this is a study by Karthik Muralidharan, Sandeep Suktankar and Paul Niehaus, they show that the wages go up in the places where people were getting where the fingerprint verification was being used. People are getting paid more money. They're much less money is being leaking out. Basically, the panchayat was stealing some part of the money, and that got stopped because now you have to verify them using people's fingerprints. You can't just say that I paid it to X and then X doesn't have to be anywhere.
Okay. So there's another question from now this seems like from Prakash Kumar asking whether do you think a democratically elected government has a better opportunity to eradicate poverty? Now, is he talking in relation to China, or I don't know?
I assume that's what he has in mind.
Yeah.
It's a fair question. So, I mean,
but China has done better than us, right?
China has done better than us, but I don't think if you took the average of all the non-democracies, they've done disastrously. I mean, the average non-democracy is not China, but an African dictatorship, and those have done very badly. So I mean, I think if you take the overall picture, I think democracies do better than dictatorships. Not hugely better, but I think that China happens to be the one kind of remarkable success among large dictatorships. There are no other real successes. I mean, the other kind of non-democratic regimes that have been successful have been small countries, Singapore, but that's like an island. But it's if you take the basic example of what's a typical non-democracy, it's Nigeria, or till recently, and it's not a great success.
Also, Abhijit, now I'd like to sort of ask you whether within a broader constitutional democratic framework, if the government forces certain things, imposes certain things on people, which is the current debate about Aadhaar, right? Now, there's a big debate, you must be reading in the papers here, on Parliament is seized of the matter, Supreme Court is seized of the matter. whether Aadhaar should be made mandatory for people. The finance minister in parliament said yes, it should be made mandatory, because the government's perspective is that they are using it to better target welfare schemes, JAM as you said, Jan Dhan Yojana Mobile and Aadhaar. So, how do you see this rights versus the state's attempt or state's argument that we are only doing this to target things better and attack leakages, and they are also giving, the state is giving examples of how midday meals they have discovered vast number of wasteful midday meal cases which they are trying to now sort of eradicate. So, rights versus targeted delivery. How do you see this as a political economist?
So I think that part of the conversation I find entirely typical of a lot of conversation in India, which is that when we talk about the question of violation of rights, we act as if we aren't violating every other right and left every day.
Yeah.
So there's this pretense that somehow the Supreme Court acts as if if it just dictates that we have to protect people from using Aadhaar, everything else, every other right will be respected automatically. We have this kind of fantasy world which is always counterpointed to the reality, and so I feel that a little bit not helpful. Now, having said that, I think the particular example the government is using of that one is a delicate one, because a lot of children who don't show up in school might be in school, might have, it's not that they don't exist, they might actually exist, but they might be in private school, but they might come in after lunch at lunchtime to eat lunch. I've seen examples of that.
Okay.
So it may well be that this is a little bit, the government is now actually throwing out kids who actually do eat the lunch and who might be poor and who might benefit from it. So it's not clear to me that that's a very good example. But I think the general conversation is vitiated by this, this assumption that we can legislate perfection.
Okay, yeah, sure. So in some ways, legislation itself assumes the characteristics of technology.
Yes, exactly.
It's like
a button and it will all happen.
So Abhijit, there's another question from Maddie Barney, and this is interesting because you mentioned this in your chapter, and even Amartya Sen mentions this about what should the ideal human development index measure. Now it's an interesting question, because your chapter itself says that we are moving away from recording calorie consumed or to a broader deprivation index. So to be honest, this should be a democratic decision. My view on this is just, I'm a citizen. I have a view on I think infant mortality is a tragedy, and I put a lot of weight on it. But I think every other bad thing is also a tragedy. I think rights, violation of rights, gender equality, these are also health education, primary health, minimum health care.
The fact that our children are in school but they're not learning, isn't that a tragedy? There's so many tragedies. Each of us has to pick our own priorities, and in a sense the poverty index is not going to solve that problem. It doesn't tell you truth. It's just a way for us to democratically agree that this is success. So your view of success is different from mine, and so we'll have to have some way of weighing those, and the index is just a way to weigh those. Is to say that I'll put so much weight on infant mortality, which I care about, and maybe you care about education, and we'll put this much weight on that. But there's no truth there. It's just democracy has to somehow resolve the fact that each of us has different priorities, and that's all that an index does.
In this context, Abhijit, I'd like to ask you whether, as the structure of the economy changes over the years, which India has, which you also recognize, and you also said that as the structure of the economy changes, as the structure of society changes, you also devise different ways of not only measuring poverty, also say designing human development index, right. So, like you argue that when India was primarily agriculture, it was just bare bodies, working the, working towards working the fields and sweating it out. So, they needed certain minimum calories. They were like machines. So, they had to. Now, structure of the economy has changed. You have industry, you have services. So, in your experience, you've been coming to India. How have things changed in terms of what you see intuitively? Quite apart from measuring poverty,
I think that the first order fact is just people are so much richer. I was in rural West Bengal day before yesterday, and I've been going to rural West Bengal since I was since 1967, and I have memories of what rural West Bengal looked like and what it looks like now. There's prosperity everywhere.
Did you see?
You see it.
Demonstrably,
children. You see no children with reddish hair and a big little belly wearing no clothes. That's what you used to see everywhere. Now you don't see them.
Do you see a lot of blue jeans?
Every child is dressed. I mean, there is prosperity. There's no question that we've come a long way from in terms of what, just in terms of like the economic measure of quality of life, we've come a long way. There's no question about that. I mean, we can argue about how much and whether we've lost other things and whether the community is now less sustaining, but just plain economics, things have got a lot better. No question.
No question about that. And tell me, I mean, finally, this is something that's been troubling me for years. Do you think when NSSO does surveys on consumption, do you think people tend to underreport in order to ensure that some of the state welfare schemes will come to them? Why I am asking you this is that the one issue that economists have not been able to crack in India is how you cannot reconcile the consumption expenditure as calculated from the national accounts with that of what you get from the NSSO survey, and the gap has been widening. And in one of the chapters I read, until about 62 or 65, the gap was not so wide. Why is the gap widening between NSSO consumption expenditure figures and the national accounts expenditure figures?
So, I mean, as part of it is growing inequality. The rich don't respond to surveys. So Thomas Piketty and I many years ago estimated that about a quarter of the divergence you can explain by increasing inequality. So, and I think that would probably continue to be true, that just the fact that the rich are, you go to a rich housing colony, they don't let you in. If there's a gate, but that's where how most of our consumption happens. The very rich have a huge part of our GDP. So part of it is just that we are structurally incapable of getting the very rich. So that's part of it. Part of it is, I suspect you're right, and it would be interesting to see is there ways to find this out. If you could sort of whether people are strategically underreporting. I think it's interesting. Just one of the sad facts is that we used to do lots of measurement exercises. Mahalanobis invented this idea that you would send people with different kinds of questions and try to figure out, triangulate, figure out if this was, they actually
just to catch them out. Yeah.
So he actually invented that art. We were the world leader in that.
What is called interpenetrable
samples.
Example.
Yeah, exactly. So he invented that art, and this was his famous contribution to the world. And we've forgotten all that. We don't do any of that, but it's a great question.
Do you think that can be reinvented in today's context?
We could easily do it.
Yeah.
We just have to take it seriously. We have to take measurements seriously. Otherwise, the reason why this has happened and keeps diverging is because we don't do anything about it. In the end, if we actually wanted to fix it, we could do better job. We could, we could estimate what the rich are consuming by, using what gets sold and things like that.
And how does Abhijit, how does your Poverty Action Lab exercise in India? What sort of interface does it have with the government? Does the government take advice from you, or at least you come up with some interesting data points? Do they sort of respond?
So I think we have very good relationship with a number of state governments. In Tamil Nadu, I think in particular, we have we have a MOU with the planning ministry, and they fund a bunch of. They ask questions. They say, we would like to know an answer to this. How do we deal with obesity or with diabetes? And they fund studies, and so we have a very close connection. For example, with Tamil Nadu government, but we're working right now with the Haryana state government, the West Bengal state government, the I guess with the Bihar government, with the Jharkhand government, with the Andhra Pradesh government. So we're working with the Gujarat government. We're working with a bunch of the governments. So it's mostly, since program implementation happens at the state level, most of our engagement is with the state government. But we have
that's where the action is.
And we have very good relationship with a number of them. BJP states, non-BJP states. We don't have any.
And many of these areas are state subjects also, right?
Yes, education.
Like health is a state subject.
Education, health, and even the implementation of NREGA is a state.
It's a state subject.
So it's where the action is. So we're very much there. We have good connections. We don't feel that we don't have to fight to get our. We have something to say. People are willing to listen. We don't have a problem with that. And this is across the board. It doesn't matter which party. I think mostly we get good responses.
Okay. And one final question, Abhijit. This is another puzzle which troubles me no end, which is actually this came out in a recent discussion that I was moderating with Shashi Tharoor and former Health Secretary Sujata Rao. You might know her. She's written just come out of the book. So Shashi Tharoor said that a national health policy has been the same for all the states over the last maybe 30-40 years. It has undergone change, correction, several committees coming and coming up with new findings, new reports, new ways of doing things. Shashi says that since he is a member of Parliament of Kerala, the same strategy which Kerala has adopted has got good results, but other states have not. Maybe Tamil Nadu has also got better results. Now, how does this happen?
Well, I think that there's I think partly health is one place where it's very much, if you go to in Rajasthan, where I know the healthcare system very well, I worked on the healthcare system in Rajasthan for many years. Essentially, nobody goes to the government health system, and therefore everybody is unmotivated. So if you look at the PHC level, the primary health center level or below, they are unused. You go to one of them, it's empty. Nobody's there. The doctor's not there. Patients are not there. They're all gone.
So there is no culture.
There's no culture. And so
visiting primary health centers.
People go to their private doctors who are often quacks. But if that happens, then of course everybody is undermotivated. There's no point in going and sitting.
And is it true that in Tamil Nadu, I'm told that women, there's a 100% strike rate for women going to government health centers for delivery of kids?
100%, but it's high. It's very high. And I think it's a matter of if there's no demand, the supply won't work. You cannot just expect people to feel motivated if there is no supply. So I'm not saying it's people's fault. I think
is something else at work?
Well, partly. If you have a history of, you go, the door is closed, you don't show up the next time, and then if you don't show up, your friend doesn't show up. So as people have slowly, basically checked out of the government health system. At this point, there is very hard to fix it. It's not a matter of the structure. It's a matter of people's perception that this is, you talk to them, you ask them, why aren't you going to the health center? We have a movie we made where we were asking people, why aren't you going to the government health center? It's right there. And they said, no, well, we don't go there because there's no one there, and we don't get the right treatment. And so people have this belief that it's useless. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, but once you believe that it's useless, you don't go. But once you don't go, then there's no point running the system, so nobody shows up.
Okay.
It's kind of
so you would say that each state has evolved its own, let's say, for want of a better word, culture of delivering welfare or even accepting welfare. Could that be a
I think that's true, though I would say that some of those ways are much better. I mean, I think welfare works much better in Kerala and Tamil Nadu than in most states. So I don't think that these are all born equal. I think some of these are terrible. I mean, in Rajasthan, the healthcare system is a complete waste of money. You have doctors who are appointed, you have nurses who are appointed, there is medicine that's provided. Nobody uses it. That's a tragedy in a sense.
So, thank you very much, Professor Abhijit Banerjee, for joining this discussion with The Wire. That's all we have for now. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.